When Grandma passed away, everyone expected a predictable inheritance. My cousins got houses, cars, and land, tokens of status and comfort. I got an old leather-bound diary. No explanation. No note. Just a worn-out journal filled with fading ink and cryptic entries. At first, I felt humiliated. Forgotten. But then I stumbled upon a page titled Vault, and everything changed. As I dug deeper, secrets began to unravel. Family lies. Hidden legacies. A trail of choices Grandma made in silence. The diary wasn't just a journal. It was a map. And what it led to would turn our family upside down. Because buried beneath decades of loyalty, betrayal, and guilt, Grandma had left something no one saw coming. This is not just a story about inheritance, it's about the cost of truth, the weight of memory, and the kind of justice that only time can deliver. The house smelled like polished wood and old money. The air was thick with tension masked behind fake smiles. My cousins floated through Grandma's mansion like it already belonged to them. And in a way, it did. The will had been read. Craig got the lake house. Melissa inherited the summer cottage. Andrew, the one who rarely visited, ended up with 2 acres of land in Vermont. I got a diary. It was handed to me quietly by the attorney, Mr. Lorman, after the reading. He didn't meet my eyes. Just placed it in my hands like it was a formality. A gesture. The way people give a condolence card when they don't know what else to say. I stood there holding it, cracked leather cover, yellowing pages, a faint scent of lavender and smoke. I waited for someone to say there'd been a mistake. That my real inheritance was coming later. That this diary led to something else. But nobody said a word. The cousins barely looked my way. Greg made a half-hearted joke about getting sentimental junk instead of property, and everyone laughed. I didn't. Grandma and I had been close. Or so I thought. I was the one who called her every Sunday, who brought her almond pastries from that place she loved downtown. I was the one who sat with her through chemo, who held her hand the night she said she didn't want to die in a hospital. And yet, here I was, standing in the hallway of her estate with a dusty book while the others signed property deeds back home. I didn't open it right away. I left it on my desk for days, angry at it. Angry at her. Angry at myself for thinking I was different, that love translated into legacy. When I finally flipped it open, I expected recipes. Childhood memories. Maybe a few reflections about the Depression or Grandpa's war stories, but it wasn't like that. The entries were detailed, meticulous. Dates, names, moments. Some I remembered, like the afternoon we made lemon pie after my high school graduation. Others were before my time. And some were, strange, June 4, 1978, he came back today. I buried the receipt beneath the third floorboard like we agreed. No one must ever know what we did. I blinked. Reread it. Who came back? What receipt? What agreement? More pages. More cryptic lines. Mentions of a man named Harold I'd never heard of. A reference to the safe beneath the lilies. A drawing of a key. I started to think maybe Grandma had lost her mind near the end. Or that this was fiction, her way of writing herself into a better past. Then I found it, a page near the middle of the diary. Titled in block letters, underlined 3 times, vault.no date. Just a list, box 917 black envelope, do not trust Greg, return only if necessary, bank slip, Northwest branch code, 4-2-8-6. My chest tightened. It wasn't nonsense. It wasn't sentimental rambling. This was intentional. Calculated. She had left a map. A warning. Maybe a revenge, and if she didn't trust Greg, the golden boy of the family, what else didn't we know about the inheritance? I closed the diary slowly, heart pounding. The cousins had gotten houses, but I might have just inherited a secret worth destroying them for. Didn't sleep that night, the diary sat beside me like a live wire. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the word vault written in Grandma's sharp, deliberate handwriting. That list hadn't been poetic or nostalgic. It was a set of instructions. A code. A threat. And a question I couldn't ignore: what had she left behind that was worth hiding from her own family? The next morning, I called the Northwest Branch Bank listed in the diary. I tried to sound casual, but even the receptionist's voice grew colder when I mentioned the vault. She transferred me twice before I was told I had to come in person, with identification and proof of relationship. That was already strange. Vaults didn't usually come with warnings. I dressed quietly, like I was attending a funeral again. At the bank, the clerk behind the glass stared at me for a long time after I handed her the diary page and my ID aisle. "Need a moment," she said, disappearing into the back. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, a man in a navy suit appeared and led me through a locked door into the lower levels of the bank. The vault room was cold and smelled faintly of metal and mildew. He stopped in front of a small compartment labeled 917. "Just like in the diary, this hasn't been opened since 1996, he said, his voice low. "She left specific instructions that it could only be accessed by you." I hesitated. "By name?" He nodded. "She said you'd come alone. And that if anyone else asked, we were to destroy the contents." He handed me a key. My hand trembled as I turned it in the lock. Inside was a small black envelope, brittle with age, and a velvet pouch that jingled faintly. I opened the envelope first. Inside were 3 photographs, a birth certificate, and a typewritten letter. The photos were old, grainy, but unmistakable. One showed Grandma in a hospital room holding a newborn. Another showed her in front of a modest house I'd never seen. The third made my stomach drop. It was Greg. As a teenager. Standing beside a man who wasn't his father, the letter began, "If you're reading this, it means I've finally done what I should have done decades ago." She confessed to having had a son before marrying Grandpa, a boy she gave up under pressure from her family. That boy was Harold. And Harold was Greg's father. Greg wasn't my cousin. He was her grandson through the child she had hidden her entire life, but that wasn't the worst part. The letter claimed Greg's father had returned in the late 70s to demand something: money, silence, forgiveness. And something happened. Something Grandma never wrote plainly. Only hints: the receipt, the agreement, the night we buried the truth. She never said what they'd done, only that it could ruin everything if it came out. I stared at the picture of Greg again. The golden boy who got the lake house. Who Grandma warned me not to trust. Suddenly, every family story, every Christmas dinner, every moment where he got more than the rest of us, it all looked different. The velvet pouch held jewelry. Old pieces, but with names etched on the back. One ring had my mother's initials. Another, a woman's name I didn't recognize. Beneath them was a small slip of paper with an address and a date scribbled in pencil: March 12, 3 p.m. Meet there alone. The date hadn't passed. I left the bank with the envelope clutched tight in my jacket. Outside, the air felt thinner. I wanted to scream at someone, to confront Greg, to call my cousins and ask what they really knew. But I didn't. Instead, I went back home and began researching the address. It was a storage facility. Private. No website. Just a phone number. And a locked gate in a part of town I'd never visited. I stared at the screen for a long time. Grandma hadn't given me a house, she'd given me a trail. A buried life. And maybe, just maybe, a weapon. And the closer I got, the more I realized, someone else in the family might already know. The day of the meeting arrived like a storm without thunder. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my friends, not my coworkers. I left my phone in the glove compartment and took only the diary, the letter, and a copy of the photographs. The storage facility was in a part of the city where the sidewalks cracked and old factories stood hollow like forgotten temples. Rusted gates. Faded graffiti. A strange silence that made every step feel like trespassing. Unit 42. That's what the paper said. March 12, 3 p.m. It was 2:56 when I arrived. The gate was unlocked. I walked past rows of numbered steel doors until I reached it. Unit 42. The padlock was missing. My heart thudded. Someone had already been here. I stepped inside. The unit was almost empty. Just a folding chair, a table, and a single cardboard box sealed with tape. No one in sight. I hesitated, then opened the box. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Handwritten letters, bank statements, medical records. All tied to Harold. And, more shockingly, to Melissa. One letter, written in shaky pen, read, "I can't keep the baby. She said we'd be protected if we disappeared. Greg can never know the truth about his father, or about her." My breath caught. Melissa, my cousin who inherited the summer cottage, had known Harold too. Known about his connection to Grandma. This wasn't just about Greg anymore. Someone had helped keep Harold's memory buried, and then I heard it. A soft shuffle outside. A shadow flickered past the open door. I froze. "Hello?" I called, voice tight. "Is someone there?" Silence, then footsteps. Fast. Running, I bolted out of the unit, just in time to see a figure in a black hoodie turning the corner. I chased them, yelling, but by the time I reached the end of the row, they were gone. Only the distant hum of traffic and the sharp bite of fear remained. When I returned to the unit, the box was gone. Someone had been watching me. They knew about the letter, the meeting time, the storage unit. And they'd taken it all back, like erasing chalk from a board. I stood there for a long time, shaken. Later that night, I reviewed the documents I'd managed to photograph with my old pocket camera. One name stood out again and again, buried in hospital forms and financial records. Claire Hendricks. Didn't know her, but Grandma had used that name, or someone had used it in connection to her. A second identity. A shadow life. I called. "Melissa," she answered on the second ring, her voice tense. "Hey, everything okay?" "I found something," I said. "About Harold. About Claire Hendricks. About you." Silence. "I don't know what you think you know," she said, finally. "But you need to stop digging. For your sake." That wasn't fear in her voice. It was control. Like she already knew what I'd seen. Like she wasn't surprised I had called, just annoyed I'd made it this far. "I think Grandma gave me that diary because she knew you wouldn't let it stay buried." Another pause. "Then, you think that diary was a gift?" "It was a fuse. And if you light it, you better be ready for the whole thing to blow." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, suddenly aware of how quiet my apartment was. Claire Hendricks. The letters. The vault. The missing box. Melissa's warning. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was a cover-up, and someone, maybe more than one person, had killed to keep it hidden. After Melissa's warning, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the diary spread open, photos scattered like puzzle pieces, and Grandma's words circling in my head. "Do not trust Greg. Return only if necessary. Vault. Claire Hendricks." Who was she? A few clicks online turned up nothing. No obituary. No marriage records. Nothing official under that name in our state, but when I tried one of the old addresses listed on the hospital forms, I found something. A deed. It wasn't registered to Claire Hendricks. It was registered to Margaret Thompson, my mother. The address was an old duplex on the edge of town, long since sold. But I remembered it. I'd been there once, as a child, on a weekend trip with Mom. She'd told me it was a friend's place, but now I saw the truth. Claire Hendricks was an alias, one my mother used. And Grandma had known. I drove to Mom's house that night without calling. She answered in a robe, her face tired, eyes wary. I need to ask you something, I said, standing in her doorway. And I want you to tell me the truth. She didn't flinch. Just stepped aside. I showed her the photos. The diary. The letters. I asked about Claire. About Harold. About the storage unit. Her hands trembled as she picked up the image of Greg. Standing with the man who wasn't his father. I always knew this would come back, she said, finally. Your grandmother spent her life trying to make sure it wouldn't. She made tea, even though neither of us drank it. A habit, maybe. Or a ritual before confessing sins. Harold was your uncle, she said. But you're not going to find him in any family photo albums. Mom got pregnant with him when she was 17. Her parents sent her away to have the baby in secret. She never told anyone who the father was. Just said she made a mistake. What happened to him? He was adopted. Quietly. But she kept track of him. Visited him when she could. Sent money. I think she always meant to bring him back. But by the time she tried, it was too late. I waited. Harold came back when I was in college. He was angry. Confused. He wanted answers she couldn't give. She offered him money instead. A way out. He took it. Disappeared again. But then, years later, he showed up with a child. Greg. I stared at her. She said he needed help. Said the mother had run off. Said she couldn't let another child go into the system. So she raised him like a grandson, even though no one knew who he really was. And Melissa? I asked. She was in love with him, my mother whispered. They were young. It wasn't supposed to last. But when she got pregnant, things spiraled. Mom handled it. Quietly, like always. No one in the family ever found out. The pieces were falling into place. Greg wasn't Grandma's only secret. He was the center of a web of lies. And those lies had started long before I was born. What happened to Harold? I asked. Why mother hesitated. Then said something I'll never forget. He didn't die naturally. The room went cold. I don't know what happened that night, she said. But I know Mom paid someone. There were whispers. People who came and went. And after that, we never saw him again. I couldn't speak. She kept the diary for you, my mother added. She said one day you'd understand. That you'd know what to do with the truth. That night, I read every page of the diary again. There were hints everywhere. Mentions of the garden. A small cross drawn in the margin beside the phrase where we laid it all to rest. The lilies. The safe beneath them. It hadn't been metaphor. It had been location. Grandma's garden was still untouched, even after her death. And I knew what I would find there, but I wasn't the only one following the trail. Because when I stepped outside my apartment the next morning, there was something taped to my front door. A photo of me at the bank, with one word written in red marker across the bottom: stop. The lilies were still blooming. Grandma's garden had always felt sacred, even when I was a child. She tended to it with the kind of devotion most people reserved for religion. Tulips, peonies, lavender, rose. But the lilies, they were hers. She used to say, if you want to keep something safe, bury it in beauty. Now I understood what she meant. I arrived just after dawn. No neighbors around, no curious cousins circling the estate. I wore gloves and carried a small shovel in my backpack. Everything felt rehearsed, like I was acting out a script she wrote decades ago. The patch of lilies was exactly as she'd drawn it in the diary. A stone slightly off-center. A dip in the soil. I began to dig. 0.6 inches down, I hit something, wood. Rotten, but intact. A small chest, bound in iron edges. I lifted it slowly. My hands shook. Inside were two things: a cassette tape and a sealed manila folder. I didn't open the folder. Not yet. I needed to hear her voice. Back at my apartment, I pulled out an old tape player and hit play.at first, only static. Then her voice, soft, slow, aged. If you're listening to this, it means the others didn't stop you. I'm sorry for that. I hoped love would be enough, but I know now that it wasn't. This family is built on secrets. I was just the last one to hold them. She spoke of Harold. Of how he came back the night everything went wrong. How he threatened to expose her, not for abandoning him, but for lying about who his father really was. It wasn't a mistake, she said. It was something darker. He had accused her of hiding a crime. A man had died in that small town where she'd been sent away as a teen. She never named names. But it was clear, whatever happened, it haunted her until the end. Then came the confession: it wasn't Harold who I feared most. It was Greg. He knew too much. And when he turned 18, he started asking questions. He found the money I was sending. The records. The letters. He confronted Melissa. I think he knew what happened to his father. I think he may have been there. Silence. Then, I left everything to him because I thought it would make him stop looking. But it didn't. If you're hearing this, it means he's still trying to control the story. He'll do anything to protect it. Even now. I pressed stop. My breath felt caught in my chest. I opened the folder. Inside were police reports. Photos. A signed affidavit from a nurse who remembered treating a young woman under the name Claire Hendricks in 1978, with bruises and a broken wrist. Next to it, a document Grandma must have forged to claim she was alone in the hospital. It was the missing piece of her silence, not guilt, but fear. She hadn't hidden Harold because she was ashamed of him, she had hidden him because someone powerful wanted him gone, and now Greg was trying to erase what little evidence remained. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number: meet me. Or I go public location, the same storage facility. When I arrived, Greg was waiting. He leaned against the unit's door, arms crossed, eyes colder than I'd ever seen. So, you found it? I did. You think you understand what she did? He asked. You don't. You were her favorite. She gave you the diary because she knew you were too emotional to use it properly. I held up the tape. I have her voice. He didn't flinch. She was losing her mind, he said. You really want to destroy this family over ramblings? She warned me about you. She warned all of us. That's who she was. She left messes for other people to clean up. He stepped closer. Burn it. Walk away. I'll make sure you're taken care of. You want a house? You'll get one. You want to keep digging? Fine. But just know, you're not the only one with things to lose. I stared at him, then I turned and walked away. That night, I uploaded the tape and the documents to a cloud drive. I didn't release them. Not yet, because Greg was right about one thing: this wasn't just a family secret. It was a story of power, of silence, of survival, and now, I held the ending in my hands.